What is going on, YouTube people? Neo Cards and Comics here for the weekly non-sports card / comic book video. Touch on a little bit of Marvel cards today, a little bit of comic books, some Disney nonsense, some Marvel card nonsense with some bidding. Get into all of it. News-wise, not a ton of stuff happening in regards to the collectible space. I ran through David Adams and looked at like all the current Marvel boxes and all that stuff. Everything, prices are basically the same on it. The biggest newsy stuff to kind of happen was a bunch of rumors around Silver Surfer potentially coming to the MCU as a Disney Plus standalone. And Mephisto, I know, Mephisto confirmed. Sacha Baron Cohen potentially playing, or not potentially, cast as Mephisto in the Ironheart series that'll be coming out sometime in the future. We'll talk specifically about that here in a little bit when we look at Silver Surfer number 3. The other thing, and I have not seen it yet, so I cannot speak to this personally. I'm just going off of what I'm picking up online. If someone saw it, please let me know in the comments down below. Black Adam came out this past week with The Rock. That movie has gotten very, very, shall we say, mixed reviews, which is not a good look for the DC, Marvel or DC movie universe, rather, as it was kind of already on very shaky ground as it was. And I think people were really hoping that this movie could potentially turn things around. Once again, I have not seen it, so I'm just going off of word of mouth, and sometimes that's all that matters. If the general vibe is that everyone was kind of meh on it. Basically, what I heard is that the Justice League stuff was cool. Dr. Fate was cool. Black Adam storyline stuff was kind of eh. Rock is always going to be the Rock. But we'll see what that means for the future of the DC movie universe, which continues to basically just trip over itself. Before we dive in the individual charts, graphs, items that we want to chit chat about, today's video is sponsored by our friends over at MySlabs.com. MySlabs, in addition to having a bunch of sports cards on it, also has a bunch of non-sports cards on it, non-sports cards wax, comic books, all sorts of stuff, both raw and graded from all the major grading companies. So highly recommend going to check out MySlabs. And as I've mentioned if you watch the sports card videos, I talk about this all the time. To me, the biggest advantage of MySlabs is the fact that you hold the item in your hand. It is not locked away in a vault where you are then forced to sell on that platform. MySlabs encourages you to list on other platforms, so you can have a card, a comic, or a box of sealed wax, list it on eBay, put it on IG, put it on Facebook, and list it on MySlabs, and whichever one moves first, it moves on. The other big advantage of MySlabs is obviously the 1% seller fees that MySlabs takes out, and then everything goes through PayPal goods and services for everything else. So highly recommend that website to both buy and sell on. I've gotten really good deals on comic books buying on there. Not, about one every couple months or whatever, but I check that site pretty much almost daily to see new inventory popping up on comics, non-sports cards, and Marvel sealed wax specifically. So go check them out. And once again, shout out to them for sponsoring today's video. All right, let's kick things off talking about a little 90 Marvel MU. This was a fun graph that Gemrate has, that extrinsic_collections on IG posted. Got a chance to meet him at the National this past year. Fun dude to hang out with for a little bit at Filmington's party. This fun little chart breaks down Marvel cards graded by month by PSA in 2022. Absolutely wild numbers on this. And you really get a sense. Now, a lot of this is PSA backlog related. You could almost kind of lay this over when PSA really started cranking out on the backlog, and it would line up, because a lot of this, we'll talk about it here in a second, is 90 Marvel Universe. A ton of this is 90 MU. But it is interesting to see the lag. This is when Marvel got super hot. January, February, March. By April, it started cooling down, and then the lag effect of the PSA grading kicking in full force after the fact. Now, part of that is this is when the Marvel market peaked, so there's a lag, and then part of it too is Once again, a lot of this was 90 MU that was stuck in value submissions from the previous year. When we roll over to this chart, this is the set chart on gemrate.com. This shows the graph over the last year of 90 Marvel Universe. This is the population count increase. You could see it's just like a freaking roller coaster climbing up to go over the top. And then the other interesting one is this white circled line here is the gem rate percentage. So as this shoots up, the gem rate percentage crashes. And then this green line down here is the number of PSA 10s. And you can see how that gap widens. The gem rate percentage actually finally starting to tick back up again, 0.2% over the last couple of days. And this is something, if anyone remembers, way back when I did that first 90 MU video, that I talked about in regards to people making big mistakes, submitting 90 MU cards kind of blindly and not understanding what it takes to get a PSA 10, because a lot of Marvel card collectors at the time were not big in the grading. This is going back almost 2 years now. And I stated in that video, I said, this is not, be careful out there. People are going to get burned on these submissions, sending things in, and they're going to come back as 7, 8s, and 9s. And almost 2 years later, fast forward, and the math kind of proved that out, as a lot of those bulk submissions came back with a lot of 6, 7s, and 8s from that set. That set is very finicky, very centering sensitive, and lots of little corner dings, edge dings, and surface issues. And this is coming from someone that ripped 2 boxes of it for the sole purpose of grading them. Now, 90 MU values have come down a ton, a metric ton from the all-time highs. But in my opinion, they're actually still selling pretty halfway decently when you considered how many of these exist. But the PSA 10 pop count does stay pretty low overall. This is, once again, this is gem rate. I don't know if people realize this. There's a lot of other stuff you could do on gem rate besides just look at what the different companies are popping out. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here for gem rate percentage on individual cards, how many total gems there are. This is all things you can get on the pop report, but I actually find it easier to navigate on gem rate's website than the various population reports for the companies. So I always was interested in what card has the lowest census count in a PSA 10. Right now, that's Surfer versus Thanos, then Galactus, Fool Killer, High Evolutionary, X-Men versus Freeding Force, X-Factor. This is a very interesting list you can work for people trying to put sets together. Some of these things, if I had one of these very low population count cards, I would actually run it at auction. Because if there's multiple people fighting for it, you might be surprised at how high that it gets. We've seen some really random sales on some really random cards due to that nature. The other interesting thing is to flip this and see the highest, or the one that has the most PSA 10s on it. Stan Lee and the Jim Lee Wolverine number 10, Spider-Man number 2, which is the red and blue suit, I believe, not the black. I could be wrong on that. Captain America, the other Wolverine, Hulk Gray, Moon Knight are all way up there. And then the other fun one is the gem rate percentage, which shows you how hard it is to PSA 10 some of these things. Cosmic Spider-Man by a mile. Now, I know people will be yelling in the comments, PSA pop control on this one. I don't think so, personally. I had a bunch of these cards laying around, in raw, just in boxes and binders. When 90 MU took off, I sorted through them. All my Cosmic Spider-Mans were off-centered. I've opened 2 boxes of this product now, small sample size theater here, but I've opened 2 boxes of this product. Every single Cosmic Spider-Man that I opened was drastically off-centered. So my speculation is just something about where this card was at on the sheet consistently made it off-centered, other than, a few rare examples. But only a 5% gem rate on that one. Only 47 total. So just interesting numbers there. Highest gem rate percentage. I don't know what that Vengeance card is. Looks like it's just like an error on the pop report. 45% on Evolutionary War, Blob, Moon Knight. Some really random ones here. Phoenix, New Mutants. I know I've subbed a couple Moon Knights. They both came back PSA 10s myself personally. So, and then this is, they had reached out, Extrinsic reached out to Gem Rate and had him run a Marvel card specific cards graded by set in 2022. And here you see 90 MU lapping the field with 41,000 cards graded by PSA in 2022. 91 MU is second at 5,600, and then it goes way down from there. Not on here yet is Spider-Man Metal. We do see X-Men Metal. It came in, we're right here at 1,100. I think Spider-Man Metal will probably fly up this chart. I don't know where it'll end up sitting at, but it will definitely move up this chart if you looked at this again in a couple months. Interesting to see Weiss Schwartz. I ripped a couple boxes of that on here as well. I did send some of those to PSA. Prices have come way down on those. Those are very, very easy cards to get PSA 10s on, as they are TCG cards, and they generally come out of the packs pretty clean. I'm surprised 2017 Fleer Ultra Spider-Man is not higher on the list. But the top of the chart is dominated by 90s junk wax Marvel, for lack of a better term. And then as we move through, we see some other different things on there. And some of these are broken down by subset. So you see some 2013 retro stuff, Precious Metal Gems at 623, and some other stuff. But just some interesting things there to talk about. Moving on to Marvel cards, this is one that I talked about last week. And I wanted to follow back up on it. I was planning on it anyway, but then something kind of weird happened with this. So this Spider-Man Red PMG from Spider-Man Metal, 3 of these have sold in the last couple of days. This one sold first on October 18th, so about 5 days ago. This one was raw, went for 1,700. One in a PSA 8, so a little bit of a bump over the raw one. This sold just yesterday at 1,875. So I was using this as a pretty good guide for where the current kind of market sits in regards to graded stuff versus raw on PMGs. And the next one we're going to look at is a CGC slab, because that one of those sold as well, of the same card. Since these cards are numbered, it's very rare to have a raw, a PSA, and any other grading company slab of the same PMG all end within 3 to 4 days of each other. So to me, this is a very, very good data point to kind of see what's going on and how the market's reacting to some of this stuff. But the PSA 8 come in at 1,875, and then the CGC 9 came in at 1,700, actually sold prior to the PSA 8. So once again, the raw at 1,700, the PSA 8 at 1,875, and the CGC 9 with subgrades at 1,713. I did not look this card over that close. This is not a great photo. There's a bunch of glare on it. This is actually from the scan from CGC's website, it looks like. I've seen these before from when I submit. This is very reminiscent of that. And it makes this bottom section extremely dark. I don't want to make excuses for this card, but I am wondering if that potentially held some things back on this, because you could not get a good idea of what this card looks like. Between the glare hiding this corner and then how dark this is down here, you really can't make that out. But regardless, the CGC 9 came in at basically the same price as raw and the PSA 8. And this raw is not, I would say this is probably a PSA 8 if I had to guess. Is that? I don't know if this is something on the surface, that little blemish on his knee right there, or if that's on the top loader. But that's not supposed to be on the card. But we definitely have a white corner there. Definitely a white corner there. Some sort of little mark / nick in the top right-hand corner there. A lot of chipping around the back edge, which is very common on these cards for sure. So no way this PSA 9 is probably a PSA 8. This one was a little tough to look over because of the angle of the photo. I'm going to guess this one PSA 8. So you're essentially swapping out grading fees to get this already in a PSA 8. This one going for less than that was surprising to me. If this had better photos, if I was in the market to buy one of these, I would just go for the CGC 9, regardless about what you think about their grading, because versus an 8 versus a raw. And this one does actually look like it is in better shape, at least on these photos. But let's get into the nonsense. This, when I searched for this, I noticed another CGC 9 Spider-Man Red PMG, and that seemed odd to me. I went and looked, it's the same seller. So I dug a little deeper on the CGC 9 that went to auction. It sold in air quotes, to a 0 feedback winner right here. And it literally, let's see, this ended on October 21st. Today's the 23rd when I noticed this. Barely 2 days later, it's relisted. So make of that what you will. Let me just double check the cert number, 3001. 3001. So the cert number is indeed the same. I was pretty sure that it was, but just do due diligence. Yeah, and the numbering is the same on the serial number. So I don't know what happened here. Did either someone non-paid, shill-bidded it and non-paid. It seems weird if you were going to shill it. You would think you would shill it up higher, if that makes sense. Like if you're going to actively say, let me go shill this card because I want a false comp out there, you think you would drive the price up higher. I don't know what happened. I'm just saying this, air quotes, sold for what I think is probably a little low for a CGC 9. I would value the CGC 9 at least a little bit over the PSA 8. This sold, air quotes, a little low to a 0 feedback winner, and then not even a full 2 days later is relisted for a much higher price with a make offer / best offer / buy it now at 3,800. So you have to wait longer than that just for, now they could have just canceled the order if they messaged and said, hey, I'm not paying for this, or my kid bought it, or the dog hit the button, or whatever. I don't know what went on here, but something a little sus went on, in my opinion. Whether it was either shill bidding or something else was going on for this particular card. So this bidding looks legit. So I think a $1,700 price here is probably pretty accurate. The 0 feedback winner did not bump it up that high. So I would still put this at a good 1,700 number, which is in line with the raw. And like I said, personally, I would take the CGC 9 over the PSA 8. Pitchers make it a little bit tricky here because it's hard to judge by the card, not the grade in this one. So that's all I have on that one. Like I said, make of that what you will. Jump to your own conclusions. So let's hop over to the comic book world really quick. Mephisto spec is in full force right now. This is Silver Surfer number 3 from 1968, the first appearance of Mephisto. Iconic cover, and a book that, Swaggle talked about this in his video the other day if you watch his stuff. This book is one of the OG I went crazy in prices at the beginning of the comic book boom, because the Mephisto spec kicked up hardcore when WandaVision was on, and that was right at the beginning of comic books going crazy. So this thing went absolutely nuts. We were looking at a CGC 7. The reason that I chose a 7, and this is the way that I like to target comic books to buy potentially, this is the CGC census for Silver Surfer 3. I like to find the one that has the highest census count in a particular grade. So here we have a 7.0 with 275. That's the peak of the mountain. Usually when I go to purchase, I want this number or higher on in the grading scale. Just because then you get like the more rarity in the grade. Now, obviously, budget's going to play a factor, but this is also a good number to look at because it typically transacts the most, and in this case, it did as well. So we have multiple sales here. None have sold in the last couple days, at least in a 7.0 on GPA. Some things could have slipped in through the cracks. But what we are finding, and once again, Swag's talked about this as well, the price really isn't jumping, liquidity is jumping. And we've seen this in sports cards too, where something happens and all of a sudden a bunch of sales happen of a particular player, or in this case, a comic book, and the price doesn't move on it, but liquidity increases. So there's not enough demand for it to jump prices up, but there's enough demand to make whatever it is easier to sell at that particular time. And this was a book that was actually, I wish this news would not have come out, because this is one that's had a ridiculous pullback from its craziness. This is one like we talked about last week, where the price was just getting back to where it used to be. And I was hopefully waiting for it to see if it was going to overcorrect. And this news coming out has pretty much doomed that. I don't know that it'll spike back up again, but worst case scenario, it's probably going to sit flat and maybe jump a little bit. But you can see when you look at GPA here, if you go back to the end of 2020, a 7.0 was selling for about $500. Right now, currently, the last couple sales are at around 7. We got basically October, we have 775, 750, 800, and 690. Maybe the 690 didn't present well, don't know. But that was very much starting to creep back into that $500 range. This book peaked in a 7.0 at $1,400 at the peak of the market, $1,500 in May 2021, and has basically dropped 50% from its highs. If it got down under the $600 mark, I was going to start keeping a very close eye out for this one, because this is a pretty major key. It's a big Silver Surfer book. Major key might be a little bit of a stretch, but it's a big Silver Surfer key. Absolutely iconic cover, looks fantastic. It's one I wouldn't mind adding to the collection. I'm not a huge Silver Surfer fan, but it was more just going to be a value play of if it dropped enough. But I think this news kind of prevents that from happening, unfortunately. Two last things I want to touch on. The old Disney Lorcana pump continues. I would not be touching these cards if it was me, but the prices continue to escalate on them, especially on PSA 10s. I pulled one very specific example out on here. Here's the thing with this. For this to actually play out, like, a million things have to go right. Lorcana has to come out. It has to be a massive hit. Everyone has to love it. Everyone has to go nuts for it. And then it has to have a massive run for years to come for these promo cards to be super, super sought after. Could that happen? Is there a roadmap for it? Sure, I kind of just laid it out. The odds of that happening, pretty slim to none. Disney tends to pull the plug on stuff relatively quickly. We know nothing about the game at this point. Will I speculate on a couple sealed boxes? Sure, probably. Depending on what they end up releasing, like what it looks like, I'll take a look at it, maybe buy a box or two for a few $100, tuck it away, and see what happens. Absolutely, I'll do that. I am not spending $3 to $4 grand on a PSA 10 Elsa, that's for sure. Just over the last couple weeks, to run through this really quick, PSA 10 Elsa, $2,900 on October 9th. October 10th, and these are all different sellers, different cert numbers. I looked at all that. I did not check the bidding history. So this one went for $2,900. Let's look at the bids. Looks fine. This one went for $3,050 a day later. Looks fine. A couple days after that, this one went for $3,500. Just straight bin. Someone just binned it at $3,500. And then last but not least, this one sold yesterday for $4K. Let's check the bid history. That one looks a little... Don't know about that one. 5 feedback winner on a 4K card. I don't know. But very solid bid history leading up to that. 935, 601, 601, 261. All in the 3 to 4K range on this one. 62 total bids, 16 bidders competing for this one. So maybe that one was legit, maybe not. But regardless, you're seeing the escalation in prices as it continues to carry on. I'm not touching it. Like I said, I'll spec on a couple sealed boxes when they come out. Beyond that, it can do its thing at this point. So just kind of touching on that because it's been in the news. And then I was scrolling the non-sports page on eBay, just kind of looking for weird things. I don't know, maybe I'll include one of these a week, just like a random oddball item that I kind of didn't even know existed that kind of went for a number that I would not have expected. This isn't even a complete set. This is a near complete set. This is missing 3 cards. Beverly Hillbillies from 1963. It's 61 cards, I think. 63 of 66 cards sold for $565. And I was reading the captions on these. They're pretty funny, actually. I watched the hell out of this show as a kid on Nick at Night reruns as a 10, 11, maybe even younger, when Nick at Night was the thing back in the day, when you would watch this and I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched and all that stuff with your parents. I watched a lot of this. And these actually do look to be, the guy notes in the description that some are definitely off center, but generally speaking, they're in pretty good shape. And these do actually look like they're in very good shape. I had no knowledge this even existed. I was very surprised when I saw that it sold for $565, but there it is. If you have Beverly Hillbillies cards laying around, you might be sitting on a gold mine or some Texas tea, no pun, and wow, pun intended actually. So that's all I have for you guys and girls on this one. Like, comment, subscribe. We will catch you on the next one. Peace.